In early 2014, a tectonics expedition from the Earth Observatory of Singapore traveled to Nepal to study one of the biggest faults on Earth. The fault reaches the surface at the feet of the Himalaya, 140 kilometers south of Mount Everest, and continues deep under the mountains. This fault has generated many earthquakes throughout the ages. Some sections of the fault are yet to break, but many have already broken. The Ratu River is located in the foothills of the Himalaya, about 200 kilometers southeast of Kathmandu. During the dry season, the riverbed is fully exposed, revealing the area where the Indian tectonic plate meets the Eurasian plate. The goal of the scientific expedition is to find out what sections of the fault are yet to break and when this might happen again. Nepal is a densely populated area, and the most recent earthquake took place in 2015. The previous earthquake took place in 1934, and it destroyed large sections of the royal palace. In 2013, the observatory received a shipment. It was a seismic truck called the EnviroVibe. The truck carries an innovative technology that allows scientists to visualize active faults in the subsurface of the Earth. Back in Nepal, the scientists prepare for their first day in the field. Judith Hubbard is the team leader of this expedition. She has been studying the collision of tectonic plates in this region for the past 10 years. The Earth's crust is broken into a dozen tectonic plates that move slowly over time. They move, and when they collide, mountains are born.
We're standing here at the edge of one of the largest mountains in the world, on the southern edge of the Tibetan Plateau, which is thousands of kilometers wide, thousands of kilometers long. And it has the Himalaya at its front, over 8,000 meters high, with Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world. Those mountains are produced by the collision of the Indian plate with the Eurasian plate. They're moving together slowly over time, over the last 50 million years. And they don't move all the time. They move slowly together, but they're stuck at the boundary. At the boundary, they're stuck, they have high friction, and they build up the friction, or the stress, slowly over time, building it, until every few hundred years, they slip. And when they slip, you get an earthquake. These faults are tricky. They're under the ground, and people cannot see under the ground. The fault goes down 5, 10, 15 kilometers. And to get down that deep, people can't go down there. So instead, we're using instruments to try to create an X-ray, an ultrasound, an image of what the earth under our feet looks like.
The EnviroVibe truck allows scientists to visualize the faults that might be located underground. The truck operates in combination with a set of geophones to detect ground vibrations after they pass through the subsurface and bounce back to the top. Data is collected by the DAC link and sent to the main computer for processing via Wi-Fi.
Now, the fault, the main frontal thrust, is exposed all the way here in the southern part of the Ratu River, and it's exposed up here in a different strand to the west. But the interaction between these two strands is unclear. We know from terrace data and from river cuts that both of these strands actually slipped, ruptured in the 1934 earthquake. But how that rupture transferred from one fault strand to the other fault strand is still unclear, and that's something we're trying to get a handle on by looking at the subsurface data in that transition zone.
Okay, so the software we use to record the seismic data needs to know the location of every station. So to do that, we have a survey crew that goes ahead of time and marks out the path we're going to take with the buggy and where we're going to plant all the geophones. So the first step we do is, very low tech. We're just taking out a measuring tape and we mark the points every 5 meters, which is the spacing of our measurements, with spray paint. After that, we have a base station that records this position very accurately, and then you record positions relative to this base station. So after we've marked all the points on the ground, we go through with the RTK and the differential GPS and mark the exact location of each one of these points.
I put this on each of the points that we've marked out along the ground and make sure it's level. You have to hold it for 5 seconds and tell it to measure, and this is communicating with the base station for the GPS. And then I store the point. It tells me the observation is stored, and then we're done.
And that's what we put into the program as we shoot, so that the program can know exactly where the source of the energy is, which is the mini buggy, and where each one of the measurements is being taken, which is the geophones.
This is the DAC link. It's basically a computer, and it connects by cables to a set of 12 geophones that way and a set of 12 geophones that way. The geophones have spikes that go in the earth, and they detect vibrations. The DAC is powered by this battery. The battery charges the DAC and it also charges the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi antenna sends a signal to our doghouse, the guys who are monitoring everything that's going on, and they can tell us if the battery is bad, if the geophones are bad, if any of the connections are bad. This thing also has a GPS. The GPS usually use it to get the location, but here we're using it primarily to get the time. The time is very precise to the millisecond, and we have a GPS on the Vibe, which also has can get the precise time. So we get the time when the vibrations start, we get the time when the vibrations make their way out here to the geophones, and we can use that information and process it to make an image or X-ray of the Earth.
The truck weighs 6 tons, and its wheels are controlled by a hydraulic system. Its maximum speed is about 40 kilometers per hour. It vibrates the ground between 10 to 300 pulses per second, sending sound waves which travel up to 2 kilometers deep. These sound waves reflect off the rock layers. The truck follows closely to the planned route. It stops every 5 meters where the geophones are located and vibrates for 8 seconds. On a productive day, the truck can survey more than 1 kilometer. The deep data gathered by the truck and the surface data collected with GPS are useful to better judge the seismic potential of the fault. The base station is set up every day near the truck's new route. This is where the main computers are set up to capture the deep data gathered by the DAC links. Scientists are able to control the process and react immediately to unforeseen circumstances. The data collection process continues throughout the day.
So I'm currently in the doghouse here, where we monitor all of the instruments and the status of the Vibe when we have a link to it there, and essentially make sure that all the data is coming in good and that the power is fine across all the instruments there. So we're really kind of the quality control, and we also play control tower as far as vehicles moving up and down the line. The lunches we have delivered out here now into the field, so we keep production going. The food is always really great and really flavorful.
We're having a good day today. The buggy is shaking down there at the bridge. Right now I'm sitting here in the doghouse. We're watching all of the DACs. We're making sure all the data is coming in, nothing's going down, and we're trying to optimize the run. So we're getting all the cars off the line. We want them off on the road so they aren't making vibrations near all the geophones. And that means they have to drive a little further, so they have to hop. We have a new crew coming in, laying down the line, and then they'll have to race back to the other end, another 1.5 kilometers, and get the next one picked up. We also got to pull a giant block of cement out of an access road, which we did by hand. We have somebody digging out the rest of the access road right now so we can drive into the river.
The part of being in the doghouse that I enjoy the most is having control over the quality of the data there, since I also end up processing the data at the end of it a lot.
In 2013, an international team of tectonic scientists identified the fault that caused the highly destructive 1934 earthquake in Nepal.
Here we have the best record of the earthquake. Here we have trenches. We've dug the fault, the place where the earth actually slipped. And we can see terraces, places where the ground was leveled by rivers and then suddenly uplifted. And then you get a new terrace, and that one is suddenly uplifted, and you have 2 levels of terrace, and then it happens again. We call it a flight of terraces, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can date them to see how quickly is the Earth moving up.
Dr. Sepkota was a member of that original team and is now a collaborator of the Ratu River expedition.
You can see the terraces just uplifted above the riverbed, and you can see the very thin veneer of the sediments. The river has not time to deposit more. It is so active, it is cutting down and leaving that terrace just few meters above the river.
घाँस काटेर ओर्लेको हुन्छ नि बन्छाउला गयो घरमा गयो आधा बाटो लडेछ घर आफ्नो घर ठाउँ ठाउँमा पहिरा गए ठाउँ ठाउँमा घर लडे जमिन बेसेर माछा निक्ले जमिन फाटेर त्यस्तो त्यस्तो भयो कहीँ घाँस दाउरा जानेलाई उतातिर पहिराले मिट्ने घरमा बस्नेलाई कोही बच्चा झिक्न पाएनन् कोक्राबाट त्यस्तो त्यस्तो भयो.
Surveying the exposed walls near the riverbed can provide valuable information about the underground faults.
So with the mini buggy, we can see what the beds look like below the surface. And our goal is to figure out how that matches with what we see above the surface. So something has to happen, some event like a fault or folding, that makes these beds tip in different orientations. So here we're looking at an outcrop on the Ratu River of siltstone, which is stained this pinkish purple color, and sandstone above it. And you can clearly see these bedding planes that go between them. So some event occurred, possibly thrusting and faulting, that pushed these beds up to this angle. So they used to be deposited horizontally, and then a fault might have come up and then caused these beds to tilt up towards the surface. We can use actually the iPad and the Brunton compass to figure out the angle that they're deposited. So originally they're flat, and now they're often dipping.
After several months of hard work in the field, the team surveyed 9 different rivers and collected terabytes of data. Back in Singapore, they invested half a year in processing and interpreting this data.
These straight lines that arrive first, we can see here, are called refractions. These straightish looking lines that arrive last here are called ground rolls. And what we're really interested in is this relatively narrow interval here of data, and these consist of reflections. So what we try to do with the processing as we go forward is try to isolate
these waves here, these arrivals here that represent useful data for us.
The scientists discovered interesting new facts about the activity of faults in the southeast of Nepal.
We're actually really happy with what we can see. There's some very clear reflectors in here that show strong structure. There's an anticline, a concave downward feature beneath the surface of the Earth. Now this line here was acquired in a river where if you're walking on the surface, you don't see much in the way of deformation. You see actually the ground seems pretty flat. But when we're looking below the surface of the Earth, we can see there's actually strong deformation of the layers. These layers are usually deposited flat in horizontal layers by rivers as sediments are deposited on the ground. And they're clearly no longer flat. They're tilted to the south on the southern end, and they're tilted to the north on the northern end. Our first sense is that actually this fault continues further to the west than you can see from the map alone and from the satellite image alone. And that suggests that with more overlap between these two faults, they can probably get closer together, and therefore it's easier for them to interact and to transfer slip between them in a single earthquake.
The new scientific discoveries at the Ratu River indicate that this area will continue to have significant earthquake activity for years to come. The main Himalayan thrust will continue to shift and break as the Indian plate continues to move against the Eurasian plate. It is impossible to predict exactly when new earthquakes will happen. But scientists can better anticipate future earthquakes by studying the relation between the deep movements in the fault and the displacements observed on the surface. Future loss of human life can be minimized by reinforcing new and existing buildings in Nepal to resist large earthquakes.
Go ahead and drop down to 6. Good.